Disney's new DuckTales is a series that feels built around the lyrics of the classic show's theme song. It's a hurricane of stories bent on solving mysteries and rewriting history. And in its second season, it solved one of the biggest historical mysteries of the entire Disney Duck canon. Who is Huey, Dewey, and Louie's mother, and why do they live with their Uncle Donald? The answer was Della Duck, and when the show brought her back from a decade of being stranded on the moon, it was one of the most exciting, triumphant stories the show had told so far. Unfortunately, rescuing Della had consequences.
Launch sequence activated.
Now, DuckTales is asking a different question. Whatever happened to Donald Duck? When we last saw Donald Duck, he had clumsily stumbled into Della's rocket and accidentally shot himself into space, stranding himself on the moon just moments after his long-lost sister had escaped and returned to Earth. Unlike his sister, however, Donald didn't land in the wastelands alone for years. He landed in the Moonlanders' city and got to be around the moon aliens that Della befriended when she was on the moon. It almost sounds like a stroke of pure luck. Except, unfortunately for Donald, he's still Donald Duck. And no one gets stuck with all the bad luck, but, well...
Hey, what's the big idea?
What did he say?
He said, "Death to the moon!"
Despite treating Della kindly when she was on the moon, the Moonlanders' leader, Lunaris, is dead set on going to war with Earth. And he tells his people that Donald Duck is an invader and the greatest threat they've ever encountered. And so, the moon prepares for war. And yeah, that's a pretty heavy opening. Donald Duck imprisoned on the moon, and the moon itself preparing to go for war, and nobody on the Earth having any idea. Speaking of which, you ever wonder what's going on down there on Earth?
Photographic evidence proves that there is a fourth triplet. We must find Fooey Duck. By the way, I named him Fooey.
That fourth egg is a mustard stain.
Ah, right. Dewey. Dewey's what's happening on Earth. I love that even after teasing an impending interplanetary war with Donald Duck's fate at stake, DuckTales still makes a point to take a breath and throw in an old comics reference. Fooey isn't just a throwaway joke, he's a reference to an old artist mistake. In a lot of the old Disney Duck comics, the artist would get into this groove and get used to just drawing all three triplets together all the time. And so sometimes when one triplet had a specific action he had to do, holding up a newspaper or holding the treasure they found, the artist would isolate that triplet out and then still draw the other three, leaving four triplets on the page. And over time, fans got used to calling that extra triplet Fooey. That Fooey error is kind of a legendary in-joke, but he actually has been drawn intentionally. About 20 years ago, a Danish comic took that mistake and turned it into a gag, cooking up a half-baked excuse for why an extra triplet pops in and out of existence just randomly. Unfortunately, that's one of the comics that's just never been translated into English before. And it's not really important to this story anyway. What is important to the story are Dewey and Webby, and they're hungry for a new adventure. They're desperately searching for a new mystery to solve. Webby even pulls out the McDuck family tree, trying to find some treasure that Scrooge hasn't already uncovered.
Found it years ago, thank you.
Lucky for them, they do find a mystery that needs solving.
Huh. My postcard to Uncle Donald was returned. That's weird.
That's right, the mystery of why a modern kid like Huey would send a postcard instead of an email. Okay, we know it's because Huey's a dork, but
Why are you yelling at me?
like anything with Dewey and Webby, this whole investigation into what happened to Donald Duck, what happened to their Uncle Donald, and why their postcard got sent back kind of goes over the top in a glorious way. With a good cop, bad cop, where they're both actually the bad cops, and a perfect Dewey pun. Detective. There's also a lot of other details about this bit that I really like. For instance, it calls out that where they live is Cali Soda, the fictional fake state that the DuckTales and Disney Duck comic universe is known to happen in. As fun as I think it is to see Dewey and Webby try and mail themselves to wherever Donald is to figure out why his postcard is sending, the actual meat of this story is up on the moon with Donald himself. There, we find Donald in space jail, where he's helped out of prison by Penumbra, who reluctantly admits that Della is her friend and something about this situation just doesn't feel right.
I'm Della's friend. The point is, neither of us wants this invasion.
And one of the things that really makes this story fun is it's one of the rare moments we get to see Donald kind of out on a solo adventure. In most of the stories in DuckTales he's been in so far, he's been along with a family, or spending most of his efforts trying to keep Huey, Dewey, and Louie safe. But in the old comics, he was an adventurer in his own right, and according to Webby herself, he was one of the greatest adventurers of all time.
Donald Duck is one of the most daring adventurers of all time!
On the other hand, he is still Donald Duck.
Ah, fun.
I don't want to get too much into the weeds and the spoilers with this review, but I have to talk about the ending. So here's the quick obligatory warning. If you haven't seen this episode yet, we're talking spoilers now. Got it? Alright. As fun and light as most of this episode is, it actually does manage to merge its two converging stories into a couple of important plot points. While trying to figure out what happened to Uncle Donald back on Earth, Dewey and Webby stumble across a man who they think is trying to blackmail him. Meanwhile, on the moon, Donald and Penumbra are looking for a way to stop the invasion, hoping to find the plans to Della's rocket that Lunaris is using to build the Moonlanders' attack fleet. But they stumble across the General's secret war room instead. And this war room is really cool and one of my favorite parts of the episode, not just because it has a cool holographic Earth with all of the potential threats to the invasion, but because of the design of the entire room and what's in the middle. A prototype rocket that looks like a giant cannon that loads a bullet into the back. A bullet that someone can ride in, which is a really cool kind of throwback reference to the 1902 French film A Trip to the Moon. Unfortunately, they find more in the war room than just references to film history.
He's been planning this since before Della got here.
Lunaris' invasion isn't just a half-cocked dream, it's a carefully considered war plan, and when he shows up to stop our heroes from ruining his plans, it seems like there's little Donald can do to stop him. At least until we get back to Earth, where we find the guy that Dewey and Webby thought was blackmailing Donald isn't blackmailing him. He's actually Donald Duck's anger management counselor.
If Uncle Donald was seeing you, then why is he still the angriest guy we know?
Yeah.
And so, for one of the first times, I think, in Disney Duck history that at least I'm aware of, we get to psychoanalyze Donald's character and think about why he is angry all the time. And the answer that DuckTales gives us is sort of a neat combination of a couple of things. It's one, the obvious, that Donald Duck is incredibly frustrated with the world because nobody can understand what he says, and this makes him afraid of the world, and he lashes out in that frustration that it's a world that quite literally doesn't understand him. And the other reason he's angry ties specifically into the version of Donald that we see in DuckTales. Someone who became a father to his nephews and had to take care of them. And his grief or his anger counselor says he channeled his frustration at the world at anything that could possibly be a threat to the safety of his family. And on the moon, there's someone threatening the safety of his family. As Lunaris describes his plan to overthrow the Earth and take out all of the threats that could possibly get in his way, he explains that he figures the best way to get to Scrooge McDuck, his greatest possible enemy, is to take out his family. A tactic that puts Huey, Dewey, and Louie in danger. And you wouldn't like Donald when Huey, Dewey, and Louie are in danger. What follows is a pretty classic Donald raging fight scene, and it's always a little fun to watch. But even in full berserker mode, Donald knows he can't beat this skilled warrior. So he takes the only other option available to him: escape. Donald shoots off in that dangerous moon bullet and heads back to Earth in a ship that, as far as the Moonlanders are concerned, is something no one can survive. And it's a cool sequence with references to 2001: A Space Odyssey and just some really great expressions on Donald's part. But what it does is something I didn't expect. It gets Donald back to Earth a lot sooner than I thought the show would. For the most part, it's a fairly straightforward plot, and it's not that serious. Most of Donald's action on the moon is fairly slapstick comedy, and traditional goofy cartoon Donald stuff. Likewise, the adventure on Earth is just some pure classic Dewey and Webby silliness. And with Donald getting back to Earth so soon, it kind of establishes the stakes as pretty low. He's not going to be stranded there for a long time like his sister, he's not going to be suffering, but he is maybe going to be globetrotting a bit, trying to get back home to warn his family. And I'm really excited to see where we might see hints of where he is in the coming episodes. But overall, I kind of have a feeling the next few episodes are going to be fairly low stakes at-home adventures in Duckburg, where we get to see more time with the characters, get to explore more time with Della and Lena and all of our other new friends in this show without getting too serious. But it's gonna build to something big. Clearly, a war with space. And either way, I'm pretty excited to see that. But that's it for this short review for now. I'm going to try and keep up with these new episodes, which, just like last time, are coming out rapid fire as best as I can. So please bear with me as I do that. We've also got some other videos coming about OKKO and Steven Universe, so please like, subscribe, whatever, to watch all those, and leave some comments below telling me where you think you're going to see Donald Duck next. Otherwise, as always, thank you for watching, and remember, take it easy, Internet.